Continuing from Thich Nhat Hanh's book, A Taste of Earth. The next story, One Night Lake. Everyone in Haloa city knew the story of how the king's daughter, Tien Dung, came to marry Dong Tu, the son of a poor fisherman. As a child, Dong Tu had lived with his widowed father near the small hamlet of Chuzar. He was a good-natured boy and a devoted son, dearly beloved by his father. Unfortunately, they were very poor, and even though they fished from early morning until dark, they earned barely enough to buy their rice. One day, while they swam in the river, their palm leaf hut caught fire. They returned home to find no more than a heap of ashes. Everything had been destroyed. Dong Tu had no clothing left, and all his father had was the ragged loincloth that he was already wearing. There was nothing to do but gather branches and build a new hut. Because they owned only one article of clothing between them, they could no longer go to the market together to sell their fish. One was always obliged to stay home. Not long after that, Dong Tu's father fell deathly ill. He summoned Dong Tu to his bedside and said, "When I die, do not bury me in the loincloth. Please keep it for yourself. I don't want anyone to laugh at you because you have no clothes." Then he closed his eyes and left this world. Dong Tu loved his father too much to bury him without the loincloth. Because Dong Tu had nothing to wear, he could no longer go to market. Instead, he stood waist deep in the river and sold fish to passing boats. One day, as he sat on the riverbank digging bait worms, he noticed some elegant boats in the distance. The sound of drums and singing drifted on the air from the boats, which he could tell bore the royal family's emblem. Suddenly he realized that the boats were headed towards shore. Before long, they would moor close to where he sat. Afraid to be discovered without any clothes on, Dong Tu frantically dug a hole in the sand and buried himself, leaving a small breathing hole. When the boats docked, Princess Tien Dung, the daughter of King Hong Vong IV, stepped ashore with her attendants. It was her custom to take a boat trip every spring to visit distant regions of her father's kingdom. After a brief stroll, she asked her attendants to set up a screen behind which she could bathe in private. Unknown to her ladies in waiting, they placed the screen close to where Dong Tu had concealed himself. Princess Tien Dung began to bathe. As she splashed water over herself, it washed away the sand covering Dong Tu. Terrified, Dong Tu flipped over like a fish. While startled to discover the presence of this stranger, Tien Dung kept calm. She said, "Please use the rest of the water in my bucket to rinse the sand off yourself. Wait here and I will bring you some clothes." She quickly dressed and gave her attendants strict orders not to remove the screen. She found a set of men's clothing on her boat and brought it back to Dong Tu. When she emerged again from behind the screen, accompanied by a strange young man, her attendants stared in astonishment. Nonplussed, the princess invited Dong Tu to join her for tea and lunch aboard her boat. She asked Dong Tu to tell her about himself. When Tien Dung learned how Dong Tu had buried his father, in their only remaining article of clothing, she gazed at him with deep admiration. She said, "An intelligent and good-hearted person like you should not have to live in such misery." I believe the unusual circumstances surrounding our meeting today are due to some connection we share from a past life. For some time, my father has wanted me to marry, but I've always refused. Now that I've met you, I feel that we were meant to be together. If you agree, we could marry. Dong Tu tried hard to refuse her offer, not because he feared the princess held too elevated a position, but because he thought he must be dreaming. At last he gave in to Tiandong's persuasion. He'd never considered marriage before, but he felt a natural kinship with this young princess whose name meant beauty of a goddess and which fitted her well. The princess was not naive. She knew that if she explained to her father how she and Dong Tu met, he would never grant permission for their marriage. But Tiandong had little patience with the restrictions of royal life. She announced that they would celebrate their marriage at once in Chuzhou hamlet. After the ceremony, she sent her attendants back to the capital to inform the king and to make a formal request that he accept her marriage. King Hanh was enraged when he learnt that his daughter had married a commoner that she'd met on her travels without even seeking the permission of her parents. He shouted, "Let her do what she likes. From this moment, I will have nothing more to do with her." Though he loved his headstrong daughter, she had embarrassed him before his court, and he knew of no way to defend her shocking behavior. Far away, Tiandong and Dong Tu sailed into the harbour of Ha Luo. Liking the scenery, they decided to settle there. They sold the boat and Tiandong's belongings in order to build a house and set up a small business. They purchased sandalwood and spices from local people to trade with the occasional foreign traders who set anchor in Ha Luo. During spells of stormy weather, when the traders were stranded, Tiandong and Dong Tu offered them lodging in their own home. Dong Tu proved adept at learning foreign languages from their guests. Before long, they were running a successful business. Others, assisted by Tiandong, also set up trade in Ha Luo. She was especially devoted to helping poor families get on their feet. Foreign traders stopped ever more frequently and stayed longer in Ha Luo until the sleepy town grew into a bustling center of trade. Because Tiandong and Dong Tu were both gracious and honest, foreign traders were always eager to do business with them. Dong Tu's ability to speak their languages further enhanced the business. Natives of Ha Luo loved the enterprising couple as well. Tiandong never acted like a spoilt princess who expected special privileges. She was warm and kind-hearted to all she met and devoted herself to efforts to help the less fortunate. Although Ha Luo was soon a good-sized city, there was not a single soldier or policeman in sight. Following Tiandong and Dong Tu's example of virtue and generosity, the people lived in peace and harmony. One spring, an Indian trader stayed with the couple for more than a month. When he prepared to return home, he invited Dong Tu to accompany him. He said, "Bring just 1 bar of gold, and I will help you buy fine silks and other precious items that you can sell for a great profit. Plan on staying for several weeks, and I will introduce you to my country. I would be most grateful if you would allow me this chance to repay all your kindness. At first, Dong Tu hesitated, but Qian Dong encouraged him. My good husband, please accept this invitation. I can manage our affairs in your absence. Do not pass up this opportunity. Think of all the new people you will meet and all the wonderful things you will learn. So Dong Tu agreed to go. After a month sailing at sea, the ship anchored at a port where mountains met the sea in order to replenish food and water supplies. Dong Tu went ashore with some of the sailors and gazed at the lofty peaks. The sailors pointed out a tiny hut high up on one of the slopes, which they said belonged to a hermit named Buddhabhadra, who practiced the way. One sailor said, "We'll be anchored here for at least half a day. Why don't you stretch your legs and go up and see the hermit yourself?" Curious, Dong Tu nodded and began the long ascent. When he reached the hut, there was no one in sight. But when he walked to the back of the hut, he found a man meditating on a large stone beneath a tree. The monk's face radiated such peace and calm that Dong Tu felt refreshed just looking at him. The monk opened his eyes and smiled at Dong Tu. He said, "I've been waiting for you. What has taken you so long?" Dong Tu was surprised. "What do you mean?" The hermit replied, "Because of links in a past life, you and I were destined to meet in this life. It's my duty to show you the way." "The way to where?" asked the puzzled Dong Tu. "The way to inner peace," replied the monk. "The fortunes of this world constantly rise and fall, but the heart of one who has attained the way is never without peace and freedom. You possess all that is needed to realize the way. Stop seeking wealth and seek the treasures of your own mind instead." Buddhabhadra's words lifted a weight from Dong Tu's heart. He sat down to listen to more of the monk's teaching, which refreshed him like gentle rain on the parched earth. When it was time to sail again, one of the sailors came to fetch Dong Tu. But Dong Tu said, "Kindly inform my friend to sail on without me. I've decided to remain here to study the way. When my friend makes the return trip, please ask him to fetch me on the way back to Ha Loa." Dong Tu's friend climbed the mountainside to try to persuade him to continue the journey. But Dong Tu would not be swayed. Dong Tu said, "Dear friend, you can take my bar of gold and buy the merchandise for me. I now have a rare opportunity that presents itself only once in 1,000 years. Please understand." His friend did not press him further. He bid Dong Tu farewell and promised to retrieve Dong Tu on the return journey. He wanted to leave them food supplies, but the monk refused, saying, "There's plenty of fruit growing wild here for us to eat." 4 months passed. For the first time, Dong Tu tasted the joys of meditation. He discovered how to release sorrow and anxiety and to find ease for his mind and body. He saw that there was no need to chase after anything in this life. When the ship returned, Dong Tu's friend was surprised to find him sitting serenely in meditation. Dong Tu was reluctant to leave, but Buddhabhadra told him, "You have not completed your predestined relationship to the kingdom of Van Lang. It is time for you to return." The hermit gave Dong Tu a walking stick, a straw hat, and a begging bowl. He said, "Guard these three things. One who follows the way needs nothing more. These three things can produce miracles." Dong Tu bowed reverently to his teacher and accepted the gifts. 2 months later, the ship arrived at Halua. Tian Dong found her husband somehow changed. He seemed removed from their busy world. As he began to recount his months with Buddhabhadra, Tian Dong was filled with a strange happiness. She asked Dong Tu to share the monk's teaching with her. Dong Tu recited sutras he'd learned and showed his wife how to observe her breathing in order to meditate. He showed her how she could master her thoughts and develop her powers of concentration. Once Tian Dong tasted the joys of meditation, she proposed they gave away all their belongings. They sold their houses, shops, and merchandise and gave the money to poor families to enable them to buy farms and businesses of their own. Dong Tu and Tian Dong kept only the stick, the hat, and the begging bowl. Although people invited them to sleep in their homes, they refused, preferring to sleep beneath the trees. The straw hat sheltered them from sun and rain, and they used the stick to clear paths in the forest. Whenever they received a food offering in their bowl, they recited sutras and taught the people about the way. They lived a life of peace, devoted to meditation, and were unburdened by any cares or fears. Back in the capital city of Fengchao, King Hanh knew nothing of these things, but he had received several disturbing reports about the number of foreigners living in the prospering city of Halua. Some of his advisors claimed that the princess and her husband were plotting to overthrow the throne, and they urged the king to send soldiers to quell the rebellion in Halua. Not long after that, news reached Halua that a battalion of government troops were on their way to raise the city. The army was less than a day's march away. In terrible panic, the people prepared to flee Halua. Throughout the city, everyone swarmed like frantic bees. City elders came looking for Tian Dong and Dong Tu in hopes that they might offer some solution to the crisis. Tian Dong and Dong Tu received the news calmly. They knew it was impossible for all of Halua to be evacuated safely in one day. Those left behind would be helpless against the attack by government soldiers, who would no doubt be expecting armed resistance. After speaking with the city elders, Dong Tu sat silently in meditation beneath the cork tree. He hoped to find a solution that would prevent needless bloodshed and untold suffering. The elders conversed quietly with Tian Dong while they waited for the fruits of Dong Tu's meditation. Dong Tu opened his eyes and smiled. He had found a way to help the people. He stretched his legs and then turned to the elders. "I know a way to delay the soldiers' arrival for 3 days and nights. That will provide you with enough time to evacuate the people safely. Please ask the people to remain calm and tell them that any danger can be overcome if they remember to take care of each other. The elders returned to the city. They had complete confidence in Dong Tu. Carrying the hat, stick, and bowl, Dong Tu and Tien Dung walked down to the river. There they borrowed a small boat to cross to the other shore. The princess was curious to hear what Dong Tu's plan was. She looked at him and he said, "There is a passage in the Lotus Sutra in which a city suddenly appears in the desert. Accustomed to a simple life, you and I have no need of a city or palace. A tree is shelter enough for us. A tree, a hat, or a stick, it's all the same." Though she didn't fully grasp her husband's meaning, Tien Dung nodded. It was dusk when they reached the other shore. They secured the boat to a tree and followed a path between fields of rice until they reached a high hill. Dong Tu placed the stick in the ground at the top of the hill. He set the hat on top of it and the bowl beside it. Tien Dung joined him in sitting meditation. And then the miracle took place. A huge palace appeared where the hill had been. It was surrounded by hundreds of dwellings and shops. A prosperous city spread before them, protected by high walls and a moat. There were sounds of people and animals rushing back and forth within the walls. Off in the distance, government soldiers caught their first glimpse of flickering lights from the great city. Because they were weary after their long march, the generals ordered the troops to set camp and rest for several hours. At midnight, the soldiers received orders to attack. In a flash, they had the city surrounded. The city gates were tightly barricaded and could not be opened. Despite all their efforts, the soldiers were unable to penetrate the thick walls. There was nothing to do but lay siege and wait until the people surrendered. 3 days passed. No one entered or exited the city. On the third night, a night of many stars but no moon, one of the government sentries gazed at a particularly bright star and suddenly heard a strange voice whisper in his ear, "3 days and nights have passed. Everyone has safely evacuated the city." Startled, he turned towards the besieged city. All was silent. He looked into the sky for the bright star, only to discover that black clouds had covered the skies. A violent wind appeared from nowhere. A vicious storm broke. Trees were uprooted and tents sent flying. Without warning, a tornado swept the entire city from sight. Panic-stricken soldiers scrambled for cover. It looked like the aftermath of a terrible defeat. Before long, the wind died down and all was calm again. As the first light of dawn appeared over the horizon, the soldiers saw that there was an immense lake where the city used to be. Later the same day, other army scouts arrived to inform the generals that the real city of Halua was completely deserted. Houses and gardens were empty. There was not so much as a cow, a buffalo, a duck, or a chicken. The general did not know what to make of the strange situation. Efforts to locate Princess Tien Dung and Dong Tu were fruitless. Before returning to the capital, one general stood staring at the lake and whispered, "A one-night lake." In just one night, an entire city had disappeared, leaving a lake in its place. Halawa was not attacked again. The people returned, and once again the city prospered. Many of Halawa's inhabitants continued to practice the way and to teach it to others. Jiandong and Dongtu were not seen again in those parts. Perhaps, the people mused, they had travelled to a distant mountain to follow the way in peace. But whenever the people looked at One Night Lake, they recalled the beautiful princess and her good-hearted husband, who had always been so kind to them.